A bit ago, I did a tier list for Dark Souls 1, talking about fun factor, and I really intended on doing a bit more, and I'm just not having a lot of time in the most recent days, so I decided I would take a stab at Kingdom Hearts 1. I have a lot of it recorded, which will be done later, but this is a fun factor tier list, and that's more of a boss ranking I have planned. Same with Dark Souls, but this we're gonna be doing a fun factor like we did with Dark Souls 1. If you haven't seen that one, it's somewhere. Go find it. But we have the best fights in the game, which there's not that many actually. We have good but odd. There's a couple fights that it's very opinionated for this one. We have mid, which is just a normal boss fight. Unbalanced. There's actually not that many on here that I think are truly unbalanced or not fair, but we'll get into it. And not fun, which there's a couple, but we're luckily it's already in like run-in order or close to it, which is kind of wild. Uh, it actually keeps track really well. But let's get into Darkseid. So the first fight with Darkseid, as there is another one right here. Uh, the first Darkseid fight, I think, is actually a really good fight. It's just a little odd because it's a giant creature, and the lock-on system in Kingdom Hearts 1 isn't the best. It's definitely a lot better than the old Z targeting that was on the N64, and it was definitely better than a lot of other lock-ons found in earlier games, but it does make a lot of these fights, the giant one specifically, a little odd until they finally fleshed it out. Darkseid, though, I do think is a really good fight the first time you fight it. It teaches you a lot about the game, teaches you how to jump, how to move, how to do stuff. It's also impossible to fail, I'm pretty sure, even if you lose. So at the end of the day, I do think it's a good but odd fight. These are all just gonna be mid. I don't. They teach you about the game. I do think the Riku fight's probably the best of them. Uh, there, and then I do think the team up is probably the best. Uh, because when you're on Island, you're just learning about the game, and so having this little combat for all of it is really nice. I'm actually gonna rank him by himself higher because if you're getting level 99 grinding on Destiny Island, he's the best one, but he's still mid. We have Darkseid again. I think this is actually a really mid encounter because at this point we've already learned enough about this game, hopefully, in theory. Whoops. That you don't really need this. It's fine. It does its job. It's the same exact fight though. It has a couple of newer uh or more than likely you'll run into newer moves from Darkseid, but overall it's not very fun in Destiny Islands. I don't think it's great. We have Leon, which he has his fireball and he has sword swings. It's just kind of good, but it's very basic. We have guard armor, which I do think is good but odd. The piece stuff is really fun the first time you figure it out. It's also the first time you get access to party members, which is very cool. It does have magic resistance, which is funny because you have no magic. But hey, Donald's there, I guess. When it comes down to it, I do think Darkseid's slightly better as just learning about the game, but I do like the disposable pieces. It becomes pretty neat. We have the Trickster, or was this the Trick Hatter? He has a specific name, which is in Wonderland. I think this fight is actually really good. He's just tall, and that gets kind of annoying. It's also one of those things where there's a little bit more strategy in play for this guy. Do you want to go to deep jungle, do all of this, and then get the jungle key for the longer reach, or do you want to jump off objects? Overall, I do think it's not great, but it definitely has some cool stuff. I do think he has one of the my favorite, like, not idle animations, but like movement animations where he's just kind of like wavy and weird. It's really nice to look at and see. We have Cloud, which this is gonna be the first separation. We'll talk about this in a second. Cloud early on when you're first fighting, I think is really good. I think is a really good fight because you have very little abilities to kind of counteract what he's doing, and his overall simplicity of being Cloud, like he has his like charge, he has his like sword swings, he has the jump potentially, which he doesn't do that often in the first interaction from what I remember. This is all proud mode, by the way. Uh, when it comes down to it, he does like normal stuff, and that's fine. But the first time you fight him, you don't have a lot of options, and so it becomes like a if you learn a lot more about Cloud than you do almost every other like encounter in the game because you have to. You don't have the option to not. Which goes into Cerberus. I do think Cerberus is one of my favorite fights in the game. You have a huge arena to dodge in. At this point, you have access to dodge roll, so if you learn dodge roll, this fight is actually really easy. Uh, while he is a big creature, he's not hard to hit. He doesn't have some weird hitbox shenanigans that makes it really kind of bullshit. You can kind of clank with his bite to stun him. You have options here. Plus, you get access to Thunder after this is all done. And I do think this fight is really good the first time. It's one of my favorite fights in the early game, especially Kingdom Hearts 1's lackluster early game. Uh, this fight's just boring. I know it's talking about the one in the jungle. The If we're playing the original, which we're talking about Final Mix specifically, but it's just a very unbalanced fight, either in the favor of you in Final Mix or the Sabor in the original. Because in the original, when it went to the brush, it lost lock on, and lock on sometimes is really stupid with this boss. Whereas in Final Mix, it's super pathetically easy to the point where why is this even a thing? Really annoying. This is not fun. I know a lot of people make fun of this boss. They make fun of Klain for shooting a young boy and all this, but this boss fight is one glitch in Final Mix. Two, the stealth sneak is a very boring boss. Klain is just a boring thing that only shoot like it's just boring. It's not fun. Next, we go back to Olympus Coliseum. Leon and Yuffie, I do think, have a very good, like, I want to say a good, like, teaching moment. Because the only time you've fought multiple things, besides, I guess, this, uh, is back here. But this one is much more of a range versus pseudo range with some dangerous melee, whereas this one was just range and melee, and this one had a mix of all three. But this one feels a lot better as a encounter. I do like that you can do a stun on Yuffie, focus on Leon if you want, or you could just bully Yuffie and then kill Leon. It's up to you. I do think it's a good encounter. We have opposite armor, which I think is just mid. I do think guard armor, the first time you run into it, is a way better existence than opposite armor, because you're in a tighter arena for this one. You are just figuring out your party for the first time. You don't have any strong abilities that really break apart a lot of this. And it's mostly just the space. You're limited to a pretty tight square. That means you're always going to be in range to, like, kind of fight or not opposite, guard armor. Whereas this one, there's too much space, and it's really, really bad. I think it's just mid. Weird Pots MP. I actually really like this boss. I do think it's good. It just has the bit odd part of being hit by random, like, antenna, tail, whatever the electric tail that can hit you. The hitbox is a little wonky, but overall I do love this boss fight because at the end of the day, you get to explore all of Agrabah, like the bizarre locations in like one section, which is really, really neat, especially since you can't do that normally. And it kind of flips on its head, like the location and like chasing after it and having to like keep track of your movement while also hitting it. It's really, really fun. I do think it's a good chase fight. Jafar, I think it's just boring. I kind of want to say it's like here. I'll say it's better than Leon. Probably should have another tier where I put all these guys, but hey, Jafar is just kind of boring. Like, and it's also the same. I think Jafar in genie form is not fun. You're just hitting. This also is one of the easiest boss fights in the game. Like you're just hitting the stupid fucking lamp. That's all you're doing, and you have to It's more of a platforming than a boss. And then Cloud gets relegated to being pretty shitty in the second iteration because at this point you have access to a lot of options that kind of just wreck his shit. He does have at this point the little the glide, which he does more often. But overall, the guard spree, like he does it in the first fight, but you don't have like a good sense of guard usually by then. This one's just not like it's very pathetic. Hercules, very boring, and also unbalanced. Why did they make this boss super, super stupid? Just why? Like you will sit there and just kind of bully Hercules the whole time. It's not unbalanced in like the game's favor. It's unbalanced in your favor, which is really dumb because they could have done something with him throwing like boulders much more. They could have opened it up to more of a Cerberus like fight instead of having the normal arena and done something with him doing anything. He just has invincibilities. You throw a barrel, you hit him a bunch. You may do a punch. You may do this. Like, even in the second game, he also is really, really bad, but whatever. We have the Parasite Cage. The first encounter, I think, is kind of fun. I don't think it's anything too impressive, though. It's kind of just mid. Uh, and that's because you kind of have, Riku on standby and stuff. Uh, I think Parasite Cage 2, though, I like the fight a bit. The only problem is that the poison around it is on Proud difficulty, and if you're kind of new to the game, you might not expect how much damage it does. But yeah, we have the shark. I don't remember his name. Atlantica sucks, and that's basically all I'm going to say about it. The lock on it makes it really hard to kind of like work. Atlantica just makes it hard, which also goes into this. This fight is just unbalanced and not in your favor because the lock on really sucks, and you have to be looking at the actual magic in the cauldron versus her, and so it's like overall it's just unbalanced and not great because of it. Like, and then this is just not fun either. This is also one of the harder fights in Proud mode in my opinion, but it's just not fun. Overall, Atlantica just sucks for boss options in general as a level. Shockbach, the kids from Halloween Town. There we go. I actually like this fight. I think you can get juggled a little too easy, but they're also not that hard hitting. So I kind of want to put it with like those guys. It's kind of fun. It is later in the game, so you have more options. So I guess it would be like a little higher. It's definitely not boring or even unbalanced because you can get comboed to death in theory. Very unlikely. And you have to put yourself in a really bad position. Oogie Boogie, I think the first interaction with him is actually like okay. It's almost, I think it's better than Parasite Cage, just barely. But I do think it's going to be the bottom of this for a long time. The reason I think it's really annoying at times is because of the amount of waiting that's going on. There's just a lot of waiting, which gets really irritating. This is not fun. Whoever decided that this giant mansion should be the final boss of what Nightmare Before Christmas Land, really should figure out their priorities in life. The amount of platforming you have to do, it's like cool in a way, the kind of scope of it, but I don't know. I would rather fight another giant boss. We have Dark Sword, which I think is actually a really good fight. I love this fight. I also think it's kind of hard in the original iteration of Kingdom Hearts. If you play Final Mix, I think it's a little easier, but I do think this boss fight actually can surprise you. I do think it's fun. And I also think Hook is actually really fun. Neverland is proving that it's one of the best stuff, even though, yeah, we'll talk about it later. But when it comes to, like, the boss fights, I think this is a really good boss fight. I think he's a little squishy in Proud mode most of the time, but I think Hook is really fun. There's a lot of shenanigans you can learn about this boss fight. He isn't difficult, but he just feels fun to play against. Like, it's really hard to describe if you've never encountered the boss fights of Kingdom Hearts, but some boss fights aren't necessarily hard or even like pulse pounding. They just feel fun to play, and that's kind of what Hook is to me. We have Riku. This is before we go into Maleficent, which we have stuff. I think this boss fight is really pathetic. And then we have this boss fight, which comes a little bit. But we have Maleficent. I actually really like this boss fight. The only thing I don't like about it is that she summons mobs, which I'm not a big fan of in most boss fights in general. I think a lot of mobs are kind of lame. But I do like Dragon Maleficent a lot. I think it's actually probably my favorite boss fight that we're talking about. One, the neck into the head kind of makes it hard to hit, which it's not unfair. It's just kind of like you have to pick your spots. The fire kind of prevents a lot of stuff, has a decent amount of moves to kind of get off you, and the sense of scale, like I felt with Cerberus, is really nice. It also helps that you don't refight her, so at the end of the day, this feels like a very special encounter, and it really sticks to you. I love the Dragon Maleficent. We have Riku at the end of Hollow Bastion. Uh, Now, if we are to talk about the original, it would probably be in not fun because when you lose and you can't skip a cutscene, it becomes very obnoxious. And I know I just triggered people saying that. I do think this boss fight is really good. I think it's fun to first explore. I do think there's a couple other boss fights that I think are better, but I do think this is your first like true like you're at the end game. This is how powerful you are, and your enemies are now getting really powerful, and it feels very good. This Yuffie by herself in the Hades Cup, who is incredibly boring, and I don't think is an actual encounter in the game. Like, it's super annoying. I think Cerberus 2 really sucks in the Hades Cup. Like, it's fun to see how much you've like can do now, but I do think is a very lame encounter. It's still better than opposite armor. We have, funnily enough, this is actually harder in quotes, but easier at the same time. And what I mean by that is that Yuffie is very easy to kind of like knock out of the fight. But I do think Leon and Cloud, which back then as a kid was very exciting to fight at the same time, I do think they are quite fun to engage with. Uh, it's just a little odd that we don't get the Yuffie with them. Um, it would be very nice if that was the case because we fight Yuffie by yourself. Like, why? Hades is very boring, but hey, it's still a decent like encounter. Kind of the same with Parasite Cage. I'm just kind of bored when I play it. Also has a really broken uh, pillar thing, which is faster than your normal glide. And if you're unprepared, Hades can kill you. We have Rock Titan, which is not fun. I don't know what anybody really thinks of this. I think it's actually probably the most boring fight in the game. We have Behemoth the first and second time. This one is at the end of Hollow Bastion. Feels very weird. I'm going to put this in mid. Uh, Biggest problem I have with this is that you've just encountered some of the best boss fights in the game. Like, and you go into Behemoth like that. And then Behemoth 2, okay, I don't want to fight this again. But it's not anything different, so there you go. We have Phantom. This is not fun because the magic requirements, you have to actually change your build, which would have been a good thing, but it's actually entirely possible for you to make this harder just by what you chose at the very beginning. I do think it's an interesting design philosophy, but with your AI partners sometimes ruining the amount of damage you can do, the requirement of so much magic, and just downright how the fight functions in Neverland, it's definitely really not that fun. Um, we have Ice Titan, which I do think is a lot better than Rock Titan by a good margin, but it's kind of just it's kind of with Jafar. You're kind of just hanging out doing shit. Kurt Caesar, I did think this is actually a very fun fight without summons. If you have summons, this is kind of a boring fight. But I do think it has a little bit of a frustration factor being such a huge arena. This is going like too far in one direction where uh, like some of these fights could have done with a bigger arena or a smaller arena. This one could have been cut into quarter, and I think it would have been a good boss fight. I do wish he had a slam, and I feel like this would be a lot better for me to play against. Uh, we of course have, Mickey's greatest enemy, the devil. But let me see. I actually really like this boss fight. It's a better giant boss fight than Ursula, but still not great. I might put this in mid. Let me see. What do we have left? Ooh. No, I'll put it here. I think it's better than Oogie Boogie. I do think it's really fun to kind of fight against. It's also kind of a surprise encounter. Um, because most of these have been set up previously in other ways. And I feel like maybe there was something that could have been done to make this a lot more fulfilling. But I just love the area. I love how long it took for you to get here and fight Mephisto. Is that his name? I always forget. He's the devil one from the Magic Mickey thing. I'm forgetting. Ansem 1 on the beach is pretty boring. Yeah, there's a lot of boring stuff here. The ship is fucking boring. How do I want to do this? I think this boss fight right here is actually pretty neat. Uh, and the only reason I think Darkseid being up here in the third encounter versus the second is because it's really nice to see how far you've grown as like a person. This one came too soon after the first encounter. So seeing how far you've grown, seeing what you could do against this is really nice because this is your first big enemy, and this is the end of the game. It feels really nice. Ansem 1, I think Ansem 2 is actually really fun. As a kid, I hated it. As an adult, I think it's one of my favorites. The one on the beach is a little lackluster, but I do think it's fun. It's kind of just basic. The second boss fight feels very much ebb and flow, whereas the first boss fight is just like you can button mash. I'd probably put it up here. Uh, the terrible ship is perfectly mid and can go where Cerberus is. And then we have the two super bosses in the game. Well, okay, there's four super boss, five, whatever. We talked about one already, and then where's the other super boss? Did I put? Where did I put this super boss? I'm not seeing it. Where's Kurt Ziza? There he is. Aha! I couldn't find it. Technically, those are two super bosses, but we have Sephiroth and we have Unknown. I think Unknown is probably one of my least favorite like really best fights because it does feel hard and it does feel great to like that's what she said to also like fight this character, which I'm very tempted to not say Unknown, but some people have not played other Kingdom Hearts games, so trying to stay away from spoilers. But when it comes to Sephiroth, I do think this is one of the best fights, uh not because it's the hardest one or because like it has this better like thing than almost all these other boss fights. I do think though it's the best iteration of just seeing crazy shit unfold from like Disney characters. I do think Sephiroth is my favorite boss fight. I do think Unknown probably goes up here, uh, which unintentionally. Hold on, we have to fix this tier list. 2, 4, 6, 7. I'm pretty sure that's 11. We need to move one of you down. Okay, you're going here. There we go. 7, 13. There we go. Perfect. There's the top 20. Really, really dumb joke there, but yeah, I think this is pretty good. I'll probably do a proper like difficulty tier list, which is actually way different. Most of the Final Fantasy stuff is pathetically easy, but that'll be for another video. Overall, it's just a fun factor tier list, the same I did with Dark Souls. I'll probably take a stab at a few other series that I think have fun or not fun boss fights, and yeah, the shark is gonna be my new profile picture. It looks great, actually.